Maybe I can do a sound check for those of you online. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Great. So we'll be getting started in just a minute. So whether you're here in the room or at home on Zoom, let's make sure that we have what we need to be able to sit comfortably. Gabe is also not feeling well this week too, so he should hopefully be back with us on our last week, next week. Always good to take the time to settle in. It's really a matter of listening to the body, finding the appropriate posture for this body at this time, so that we feel relatively comfortable, knowing, of course, it won't be perfect. And that the posture also supports that curiosity, that sense of interest. Like we're sitting up right in the middle. Take a couple of longer, deeper breaths. Do that a few times. If you feel comfortable, you can let the eyes close and eventually allow the breathing to continue on its own. So you're not trying to make the breath any particular way. And we'll begin, as we usually have begun, with body scan meditation. So simply receiving the sensations of the whole head. And in particular, just feeling whatever you feel at the top of the head. And it might be some pressure, what we might call a headache. Or you might feel the weight, the weight of the hair. Or you may feel the air touching the skin of your head if you don't have a lot of hair. Feeling whatever we feel around the ears, back of the head. Noticing tension in the brow, temples. Feeling the air touching the forehead. Noticing tension, if there is any, around the eyes. Feeling the eyelids touching the eyes. Feeling the skin of the face. Simply notice where there's tension. Feel the air going, excuse me, in and out of the nostrils. Noticing the jaw. Noticing the teeth. The moisture of the mouth. Noticing whether the lips are touching or whether they're apart. And then just taking the time to feel the whole head and face together. And we don't need to picture the face and head with a mental image. We're learning to receive, to feel the actual sensations, whatever that might be like. It's a kind of exposure to the sensations of the head and face, feeling and letting them be. Not feeling like you have to do anything except to just feel, to be vulnerable to what it feels like. So in a sense, we're learning to allow these sensations to be the way they are throughout the head and face. And notice how whatever it is we're feeling here in the head and face, notice that these sensations are moving. It's not a static thing, it's a changing, unfolding of sensation. And letting the awareness settle now in the throat. Take your time. Again, we're not looking for any particular experience. We're just in this beautiful receptive mode. We're just receiving the sensations of the throat. In a sense, we're listening, receiving, and then the sides of the neck and the back of the neck, the entire neck and throat together. And again, we practice being intimate and letting all of these sensations be, letting them move, letting them unfold as they do. And for each place in the body, there can be this simple, clear truth that the sensations feel like this now. The activity of sensation is like this now. And from the sides of the neck, let the attention go down into the tops of the shoulders, all the way to the shoulder joints. Just taking some time and receiving whatever we're feeling here. And again, remember, we're not trying to fix anything. We're learning how to allow these sensations to be, allowing them to be the way they are. In motion, changing, pleasant or unpleasant, or maybe neutral, but whatever they are, we give permission. Shoulders are like this now, feel like this now. So for a few more seconds, just absorbing into the experience of the shoulders. And then little by little opening to both arms, the underarms, the bend of the elbows, feeling the skin, maybe the air touching the skin or the clothes, the sleeve, making contact with the skin. Noticing where the hands are touching, whatever they're touching, that simple experience of pressure or contact. Each finger, taking your time. Back of the hands, palms. Feel the weight of both arms. Feeling both arms together from the shoulder joints to the fingertips. And again, the basic practice is being intimate without any grasping, clinging, without trying to make anything happen. So intimacy and letting things be. And we're just practicing for a few more moments with both arms. And then we'll bring the attention to the torso, beginning up by the collarbones, upper ribs, almost like a CAT scan. We just begin to feel top part of the torso, the upper back and chest. And feeling any movements associated with the breathing and the beating of the heart. The sternum, maybe sensing the rib cage and the beating of the heart within, the movement of the lungs. All along, we're just allowing the upper back, the rib cage, the chest to be the way it is. Feel the way it feels. And eventually beginning to open to the solar plexus, the diaphragm area, kidneys, lower ribs. Take your time. We just feel whatever there is to feel here. And remember, feeling is like a river, it just keeps moving. Even if the feeling stays similar to what it's been, it's still a movement of feeling, a movement of sensation. Down into the abdomen, all the organs and muscles here in the lower back. Feel the spine. And then eventually down into the structure of the pelvis. Feeling what we feel. Including the sits bones, making contact with the chair cushion, the groin, floor of the pelvis. Take some time, feel the whole torso together. Front, back, middle, sides of the torso. And then from the hip sockets, beginning to feel both legs, taking some time as we practice receiving the sensations in the thighs. Any touch points or where the clothes make contact with the skin, down to the bend of the elbow, or the bend of the knees rather, and the shins and the calves. All the way down through the ankles to the heels. And feeling the sides and tops of the feet. Whatever we feel. Feeling the bottoms of the feet. And the toes. And then both feet, both legs together for a few moments. And remember, feeling the legs and feet, it isn't a thing, it's an unfolding or a changing flow of sensation. It's alive with change. Now the whole body together from the top of the head to the toes, inside, outside, front and back. Nothing left out. not afraid to be open and even intimate, sensitive to the whole body, just as it is, feeling and letting things be. And noticing how this awareness of the body, awareness of the whole body, that there is this quality of vulnerability, like willing to feel whatever's here to feel in the body, not afraid to be intimate and feel, and to let things be. So there's a sense of vulnerability. There's also a sense of kindness, this stable sensitivity is really very real, a very authentic kind of kindness, compassion even, being present in this way. So notice that if you can. And it's a generous thing to be present with the body. It's like a gift, a generous gift. And then finally noticing there's a subtle pleasure in being present. And in the same way, there's a subtle stress when the mind is distracted or lost in thought. It's really good to notice both. And then one last time, being intimate with the whole body and allowing everything to be the way it is. So intimacy without control, without grasping or fixing. Intimacy and letting things be in the body. And take a little time. It's nice not to rush as you adjust your body or stretch a little, whatever feels good, and just notice how it is. It's really important after a sitting period to simply sense the effect on the body and the mind. Does it feel like good medicine? Or does it feel like bad medicine? Right? It's good to ask yourself honestly, oh yeah, how was that? Onward leading to tranquility or onward leading to agitation? So again, I want to welcome everybody back. I'm glad. It's obviously not ideal to have a 2-week break, but that's how it is sometimes. I was out of town teaching in the West Coast, and Gabe came down with some flu symptoms. He's not testing positive for COVID, but it's sort of fluish, whatever he has. So he's being wise and staying out of public settings. And so this is kind of a combination tonight of what we usually cover in week 4 and in week 5. And I think as we mentioned during week 3, and Gabe sent everyone in the email a video of a previous week 4, so you can check that out if you haven't already. But week 4, we usually get interested, and this will continue forever, but it's really good to get interested in, well, what is it that interrupts the continuity of present moment awareness. And remember, our formal sitting time at home or here when we come together on Tuesday night, or any time we're present during the day, right? It's really the same practice. It's just the formal sitting time, we have more ideal conditions because it's, we find a simple time and we sit in a simple way and we leave the dog in another room and let the people we live with know to leave us alone for that 30 minutes or 45 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever you might have for your daily sitting time. But the practice is really the same. We're doing what we can to cultivate, stabilize the continuity of present moment awareness, and so much of the work is a willingness to begin again when we notice that the mind has been lost in thought or caught up in some reaction or some obsession, right? And then to find our way back is actually a big part of the training. And part of that training, the specific part that we cover week 4, is the specific interest, like when we notice that we've been lost in thought for a while, maybe sometimes 10 minutes, right? We've just been oblivious, totally forgetting that we're in our meditation, and we're just chewing on what's going to happen tomorrow or what happened yesterday or, why my knee hurts so much. But when we do notice that we've been distracted, then what you'll notice is a sincere curiosity. How did that happen? I was really intent in being in the present moment. And it may seem to us, it is actually really simple, the instruction, the continuity of present moment, valuing the continuity of present moment awareness. It seems like if someone put down $1,000 and said, that money is yours if you can sustain present moment awareness for 60 seconds. And wouldn't we think, well, that's a piece of cake, right? No problem. A telltale sign of somebody who's been practicing is they have a lot of respect for how difficult that is. It's not so easy to sustain present moment awareness for 60 seconds. No wavering. And what does that even mean? Like some people who've been practicing are still a little fuzzy, like, I'm not sure the difference between distraction and present moment awareness. And so present moment awareness means the mind is recognizing that this is being known. So even now as you're listening to me talk, you can either be absorbed in the activity of listening to me or thinking of whatever you're thinking about. You may not be listening to me, right? But you can also be aware. You can be aware that listening to Mark is like this, or aware that reacting to the pain in my knee is like this, or being sleepy is being known. So it doesn't even require you listening to me. You can be aware of whatever your mind, body is doing or not. And we want to know the difference between that present moment awareness. It's like, sometimes I use the word, you're reflectively aware. So we're aware of consciousness, what the mind is conscious of. Because we can be conscious, like I think I told you, driving home, but that doesn't mean you're aware of driving home while you're driving. You're still sensitive, you know where to turn, when to speed up, when to slow down, but are you aware of what the mind is knowing and doing as the mind is knowing and doing it? That's mindful awareness. That's what we're cultivating. It's a reflective awareness. It's really simple, but it's not a habit, so it's actually quite difficult, even though what it is simple. Because we can right now be aware of what the mind is knowing or doing. So what interrupts that? And it's like a little interesting carrot dangles some tendency, some impulse to worry, to plan, to compare. And the mind's habit is to grab it and to kind of follow it, what we call mental proliferation, right? That's the big habit of the mind. So to sustain present moment awareness, we have to know to recognize these impulses to worry, to plan. And it isn't about repressing, it's just being aware that this impulse is being felt, being known. So like you're sitting on a bus, some public space, and there's somebody who looks interesting or attractive to you. And it's really not, because when we're around somebody who looks interesting to us or attractive to us, it just sets in motion all kinds of social conditioning that we all have. Each of us slightly differently, but we just have a lot of baggage when we're in the proximity of somebody who looks interesting or attractive to us. And when we have mindful awareness, when we have some momentum, then we'll notice that tendency to want to look over there. We just caught something in the periphery. Well, that person's kind of dressed in a interesting way, or they're wearing a hat. That's kind of weird, So, but we haven't really looked, but we can notice the impulse to want to look. Even before we look, we notice the impulse. And then while we're looking, we might notice the impulse to judge. Like, that person must be a fool to wear a hat like that. But we notice it. We see what the mind is doing as the mind is doing it. And the reason I'm saying this is, with these obstacles, like the things that lead to distraction, it's not about suppressing all of these tendencies. It's just about knowing what the mind is knowing what the mind is doing when it's knowing and doing it. It's like having a wise, saintly, non-judging, angel or partner, that just is there without saying anything, but it's seeing and feeling everything. It knows what's happening. And what we find, and you'll find this, and you probably are starting to find it out for yourself, is it's a game changer. Because all of a sudden, we start to make different choices. We respond in different ways, relate in different ways, simply because there's this quiet presence, this non-judging, clear, intimate presence that is simply aware of what the mind is knowing, what the mind is doing. But it's subtle, and it's not our habit. So we need to train. Training won't make it less subtle, but training will help us keep in mind something that's subtle. And training will also help us notice all the off-ramps into distraction, so we can catch them before the mind goes down that off-ramp and worries in the way that it tends to worry, or plans in the way it tends to plan. And one thing we talk about in week 4 is, and you can experiment with this during the longer sit tonight, is to quietly, not out loud, but even within your own heart, mind, to quietly name what the mind is doing. So like when you get into territory, your mind is getting into territory that tends to lead to getting lost in thought, swept away by some stream of mental proliferation, then it can be really helpful to just name that. Oh, planning mind. Because what that does is it asserts the presence of awareness. Oh yeah, that's just planning mind being known. And you can even use that whole phrase. Planning mind is being known. Worrying is being known. Thinking about the future is being known. Remembering the past is being known. And remember, this takes some practice. When you do that mental labeling silently in your own heart and mind, it's not judgmental. It's simply reflecting back the reality of what your mind is doing. And you can do it during the day too, like when you're reaching to turn the light on, you can notice or even make that mental note, reaching. Because that's what the mind knows. It knows the reaching. Or stepping, stepping, stepping. Or you can note, name, label your mood. Not to judge it, not to repress it. Oh, the attitude is like this. Sadness is like this. Or happiness is like this if you have a happy mood. Like check right now. Everyone here, we all have a mood, an attitude, even if it's somewhat neutral. And even if you don't, it isn't obvious what word to use, you can always say, the mood is like this. The attitude right now in the mind, it's like this. The quality of my mind, the quality of my heart, it feels like this now. You see how it kind of creates that space. In Buddhism, we sometimes talk about it as a space of wisdom. Because wisdom knows it's like this now. Wisdom is the opposite of distraction or forgetfulness. Wisdom always knows it's just this, being known, being felt. Wisdom has the capacity to be intimate or to be present with the activity of the body and the mind, internal and external conditions that are here and now. Wisdom knows what the mind is knowing, what the mind is doing, what the mind is sensitive to. Oh, this is what's being felt. So experiment with some of the language you hear me using to teach in your own way that's not controlling or too demanding. Would you mind, they started the evening sit, would you shut that door now so my voice doesn't carry over into the other room? Where there's not an intro class, there's an open sit. They usually use this room, but when we're in here, they use the community room. Yeah, so that's one of the main ways that we get more skilled with these patterns of distraction. And so like when you're doing a sit at home and you're lost in thought, then you notice you're lost in thought. And you get a little bit of, you notice, having returned to the present moment, you notice, well, what's the feeling here? So you make peace with whatever's left over from having been lost in thought, like any reverberation of you were obsessing for 3 minutes. Now you remember, oh yeah, it's like this. Take some time, make peace with whatever's left over from whatever your mind was just up to. Oh, it feels like this. Can I feel this? Can I be with this? And that's a real question. You're not demanding it. Yeah, I can be with this. I can feel this. That's what's going on now. This is being felt. And then you can come back to your training anchor once you've sort of made peace with whatever's left over from having been lost in thought. Then go back to your breath. Go back to the awareness of the whole body or hearing, whichever of those 3 anchors, meditation anchors you've been training with, where you're learning how to be with it in that sustained, continuous way until you get lost in thought. And then if you keep getting lost in thought, then it's almost, maybe you take a deep breath to kind of come back, and then there's some more vivid interest, like, what is it that's arising that's not being noticed? Like there's an off-ramp into distraction that's arising, some little seductive carrot that's drawing the mind into that repeating pattern. What am I not seeing? What is the mind or wisdom not recognizing? And if it were to recognize it, then it wouldn't get lost in thought. And often it's an underlying feeling like a little anxiety, or it could even be a little joy, or the body's unpleasant, is uncomfortable, and you don't like it. So there's some aversion going, but you're not acknowledging it in your practice. So then start to acknowledge. You're basically asking yourself, what's here? And I would encourage you, and I'll try to remember to prompt you during the sit, to ask this question when it seems appropriate. What's here and now but not being acknowledged? Awareness isn't acknowledging it. The wisdom and awareness isn't going, oh, this is here. And then this practice we're doing, Buddhist awareness practice, subtle is more significant than gross. So just because there might be something subtly happening that's unacknowledged, just because it's subtle doesn't mean it isn't driving the show. So we want to start have the capacity to be interested and to be able to acknowledge with wisdom and awareness, oh, this little nudgy emotional texture is being known. Even though previously I wasn't noticing it, now awareness is, because of the increased interest, and when I say, you mean you actually can drop that question in the mind. What's here but not being acknowledged? Is there an underlying feeling here that's not being acknowledged that it's being felt? So you see, it's like if I told you there's a wild animal in this room, whether you're at home or here, you'd get really sensitive, seeing, hearing, smelling. So it's the same thing. Like if the mind keeps sliding into some obsessive whatever, or some trance-like state, but it's just not sustaining present moment awareness, then you want it to trigger a more profound interest. Almost like it's a challenge. Come on, there should be a way to sustain present moment awareness. Everybody before me, for all these centuries, since the Buddha taught 2,600 years ago, people had minds like we had, they had lives like we had, busy, and they found a way to learn how to train the mind to sustain present moment awareness. And it's the same way. They had to catch all these off-ramps into being lost in thought, being distracted, being oblivious, which is really where we are most of the day. Our waking day. I'm not even talking about when we're asleep. We're just in little bubbles. And by a bubble, I mean we're not aware of what the mind is doing. We're not aware of what the mind is knowing. In a sense, we're absorbed in whatever the activity is, and there's no space. Oh, this is what the mind is doing. This is what we're feeling. It's like this. Any questions about that before we do our next sit? Either online? Yeah. And I'll repeat it for the people online.
When do you know that you do have present moment awareness? It seems like it's just tiny little bits, but how do I know that's really it?
Yeah. That's a good question. So the person asked, When do we know we have present moment awareness? And that's really one of the main things that I would hope that folks taking the class, compared to where you were at the beginning, compared to where you'll be at the end of the 6 weeks, that you'll have a clear sense of the difference between being distracted. You know, when we're distracted, we're not even interested in the question, am I aware? Right? That's one of the definitions of being distracted, is we're not interested in present moment awareness. But there is a felt sense of being present. It has a sense of space. Do you feel that? So even when, we're using a meditation object, like, because most of us now have our eyes open, let's allow the visual field to be what helps support the continuity of present moment awareness. We're not looking at any of the objects in our room, but we're just aware that seeing is happening, right? This is being seen. Is it true? Yeah, this is being seen. Seeing is like this. And can you sense, you have to do it. You can't, it's not about thinking about it. And and if you notice your mind dismissing this as silly, then just notice that. But there's nothing silly about getting to know the mind. Oh yeah, this is seeing. Seeing is being known. So we're not just seeing, but we're aware. Wisdom is aware that this is being seen. And that, it's not quite right to use the words stepping back, but it helps a little, even though it's not quite correct, to say that wisdom steps back and is recognizing what the mind is doing, what the mind is knowing. And that creates a sense of space. And with that space has initially, and it gets just deeper and more profound, a sense of equanimity, a sense of dispassion, or everything happening on its own, a non-attachment, right? There's a particular affect to that sense of space that we can have. It's like, have you ever been at a party or a social event, like a family gathering or something, and you're totally wrapped up in the interactions and this and that, and then at some point, for whatever reason, circumstances allow, you're kind of in that sort of having stepped back, and you're just aware of the vibe of the whole scene, right? Now, the question is, could you still be interacting, behaving appropriately, and not lose that sense of space of the scene? You can, but you have to train your mind. So then, even though, as you navigate your day, different things, different triggers will trigger different emotions and different reactive states, right? That's just comes with the territory of being a human being. But there might be a way to have that sense of wisdom, that space of wisdom and awareness, even as different emotions get triggered. And you notice, oh, you're really defensive. Being defensive feels like this. Being controlling is like this. And the thing is, when we're aware of these different emotions, reactions, different choices get made, like the choice not to feed it and to let it die a natural death. These unwholesome, unhelpful reactions. We're not afraid of them. We don't want to, it's not healthy to repress it, but we let it die a natural death by knowing that I'm defensive, feeling what that feels like, but not feeding it. How do we feed unskillful emotional patterns, afflictive patterns? By getting identified with them, taking them personally. And the wisdom awareness is the opposite of taking it personally. Because wisdom and awareness understands, no, it's just this. This is how it is sometimes. This emotional reaction gets triggered. And it's like this. And it's the same if it's a skillful emotional response or an unskillful emotional reaction. The wisdom and awareness has that same vibe. Oh, it's like this. And when it's wholesome, wisdom and awareness understands, oh yeah, this is wholesome. The emotion, the way the mind is relating right now. This is good. This isn't causing harm for myself or others. Great. Right? Wisdom understands this is wholesome. Just like when it's an unwholesome, wisdom understands this is unwholesome. This is how we really build our practice, is we learn to be interested in the so-called hindrances, the patterns of distraction, both during your day, all day long, and in your formal sitting time. Get interested. Like where you go down that off-ramp into your little hell realm, into your little, escape, where we fantasize because we just don't want to be in our body or in the moment. So we have our little fantasy world that we live inside of for a while, or a little obsession over here, or a little this there. But now, because of the class and because of your interest, we're resolving, I'm going to bring wisdom and awareness with me. So we're saying to the mind, because the mind is just an aspect of nature, all these habits, these personality patterns, we can't just snap our finger and make them go away. But what we're doing is we're cultivating this value, this interest in wisdom and awareness, and we're saying, okay, body, mind, heart, personality, you're going to do what you're going to do, but now we're bringing wisdom and awareness along for the ride. I'm going to be aware. So I'm going to pick a fight with my partner, but I'm going to be aware of it. I'm going to blame my dog for making me unhappy, but I'm going to be aware of how absurd it is. This imagining that this dog is the bane of my existence because it wants to go for a walk or something like that. Feeling, oh, poor me, or whatever. But now there's just that non-judging presence that sees it all. Doesn't flinch, isn't embarrassed. It just sees it as it is, like a mirror. Doesn't flinch, isn't afraid of whatever happens in front of it. It just reflects it back. Now it's like this. Now it feels like this. Now it looks like this. Now it's like this. Good, so let's do some practice. Then we'll be more time for Q&A. So feel free, maybe stand for a little bit so you'll be comfortable sitting for about 30 minutes. Make sure you have what you need after you feel like you've moved around a little bit. Find your way back to your sitting posture. And without rushing, listen to your body, make the adjustments. Wisdom reminds us that our sitting posture will never be perfect. It may initially feel really good, but we know it's just a matter of time before the basic unpleasantnesses re-emerge, and that will be okay. So we do the best we can and we let it be good enough. And as we've been doing these last few weeks, let's begin with hearing as a meditation anchor. So once you've settled into a relative stillness, then just recognize that the mind is sensitive to hearing, or that hearing is already happening. And just practice keeping it in mind recognizing with awareness that hearing is happening. And we're strengthening a couple important skills. One is deepening our learning how to be interested in what is probably quite neutral, ordinary, like what we're hearing, but how to stay interested. And then related to that interest in what is ordinary is really getting a clearer sense of the receptive mind. Because with hearing, there's a very clear sense that I don't have to do the hearing. Hearing is just happening. It's already happening. So either the mind is remembering that hearing is happening, or it's forgetting, it's distracted. So just experiment now for maybe 1-2 minutes, something like that. Keeping the experience of hearing in mind, sustaining awareness of hearing. That was about 1.5 minutes. You can continue to work with hearing as your primary meditation anchor, but if you want, bring the awareness to the whole body. Feel the body sitting. Breathing in, experiencing the whole body. Breathing out, experiencing, sensitive to the whole body. Awareness without needing to judge. And even if there are habits of adjusting or trying to fix pain in the body, just be aware of those tendencies to want to fix or control, get rid of. And in the context of being aware of the body sitting, and you can, if you prefer, pay attention more specifically to the sensations of breathing in and breathing out. Or some of you might prefer to be aware more generally of the whole body sitting. Either way is okay, of course. But tonight, especially interested in those off-ramps into distraction. The tendency for the mind to want to go somewhere, do something, figure out something. And feel really grateful to recognize these off-ramps and to be interested, well, what's the feeling here? What's the underlying feeling here? Can I just feel this feeling? Make peace with this feeling, be intimate with this feeling. And learn your own way, learn how to sustain present moment awareness, not to lose the thread of present moment awareness, even as other phenomena show up. Oh yeah, it's like this now, and you can practice naming or making that mental note, even if you have to use the word, oh, it's this being known. So let's continue in silence for a while. One of the really useful things of having a meditation anchor is it makes it easier to study the patterns of distraction, because we catch the mind being drawn away from our anchor, and then we can get interested in what's going on, what's the underlying feeling, what's the mind doing, and then we can name that in our mind. Oh, planning, the mind is planning, and it feels like this. And remember to be really grateful for this willingness to begin again. Even if you feel like because of the distraction you're a million miles away, or there's great doubt, or you feel like you've blown it, just begin again. And you could start over by just recognizing that hearing is being known. Or just drop in and realize that sitting is like this. Go back to your breath. There's any number of ways to start over. We're never far away, of course, from present moment awareness. It's simply a matter of acknowledging that it feels like this now. Can this be okay that it feels like this now? Can I feel this? So noticing how the mind is, how the heart and body are. This sense of presence. And noticing again, as we did earlier, the similarities between kindness and being present with our experience. That inclusive quality, that generous quality of being present is similar to what we might call kindness and compassion. And for the last few minutes, we'll let go of using the meditation anchor. You might even want to allow the eyes to open, but just gazing down toward the floor in front of you. And as best you can, sitting in a relaxed way. Sustaining present moment awareness without the reliance on a meditation anchor. So there's seeing being known, and hearing is being known, feeling the body is being known, any mental activity also being known. Just the totality of the moment being felt, being known. Some aspects might be quite unpleasant. Some aspects might be pleasant or neutral. And whatever the moment is, it keeps changing, it keeps unfolding. But remember, awareness doesn't have to chase after to try to catch up or try to figure out the way it is. What really happens is the way it is just keeps showing up, and it is known. And again, we'll take a few seconds to move the body a little bit if you need to, stretch some. And as Gabe and I have been saying these last number of weeks, we learned quite a bit from hearing from each other. And so your questions, but maybe even more so, your experiences. And as I've been saying, tonight, which is really our week 4 and week 5, but tonight especially interested in what gets in the way of the continuity of present moment awareness, these off-ramps I've been talking about. What did you see? And what happens when you were able to recognize that impulse or tendency to think about something, to do something, but then wisdom and awareness recognize, oh, it feels like this. What examples do you have? Questions? Yeah, what comes to mind? And those of you in the room, if you are willing, you could sit up here and then I'll hand you the mic. That way the people online can hear you. But I can also, if it's not too long, just repeat your question or comment. Yeah, what comes to mind? What have you been learning, not just tonight together, but at home in your practice? Questions that are emerging from you. Yeah, do you want to come up here? Yeah. How is mindful awareness different than being really focused on something? That's a really good question, actually. And I should have specifically addressed that maybe earlier in the, because they do seem similar, but there's an important difference. And it is a nice skill to have, to be able to focus our attention on something and not not allow it to leave that object. And we do a little bit of that with the anchor, the meditation anchor. But when we use the meditation anchor, like being with the breath as it goes in, feeling the sensations of the breath as it goes out, a lot of that being devoted to the anchor is to be able to, because it's in the context of having that continuity with the breath that we notice the mind getting distracted, right? It's that contrast. If we didn't have an anchor, it's much harder to notice the mind getting lost in thought. But when you're asking the mind to pay attention to something, then we can catch the habit of the mind to wander wherever it's inclined to wander, right? And that's really good to see. But where we're going with the practice isn't with that focused, or sometimes we'll use the phrase exclusive attention to a meditation object, right? Because that doesn't really lend itself to being a human being with a life if we're staying focused on one thing, because our attention naturally has to go different things to different places. It has to be really nimble, and the awareness can go with it. It isn't actually dependent on the meditation anchor. That's just a training, this focused, exclusive attention to something, like we did with the body scan. For seconds at a time, we had a focused, exclusive attention. We're feeling the forehead, we're feeling the top of the head, we're feeling the face, we're feeling the jaw, So we use that focused attention to build the confidence that awareness can connect with the present moment. How do I know I'm present? Because breathing in is being known. So the anchor, the meditation object really helps, but it's just the beginning, because then we want to realize that whatever else is being known. And I want to do a little experiment right now, because as we recognize now, all of us, that this is how it is, the present moment is like this, right? And so there's the bodily activity, sensation is being known, sitting, right? Being known, hearing, being known, seeing, being known, whatever mood or mental activity, being known. When we're present, when we're aware, the very nature of awareness, present moment awareness, is inclusive. It isn't exclusive. And even though, like, I got a bright light in front of me, even though that might in a moment get my attention, so in a moment, there might be somewhat of a focused attention, like bright light being known, with a wisdom and awareness, there's a sense that everything else is also here. But in that moment of focused attention, then everything else is in the background. But then when that focused attention on the bright light goes away, then it's a more broad, wide attention of hearing, seeing, sensing, sensation, aware of thoughts. So that's the way to think of it, is we use the focused attention as a way like of beginning again. So like if we've been lost in thought, we might bring a focused attention to what's the feeling here. Having been lost in thought, what's the feeling here? Oh, it feels like this. And then we might have a focused attention to the next in or out breath. Oh yeah, breathing in is like this. And we really feel the touching, or we feel the movement of the abdominal wall, stretching out, falling in. But after we're with that meditation object in a more exclusive way, then we might relax the focus and just have more of that general, we're still aware of breathing in and out, but we might be aware of what's in the periphery or what's in the background. Like feeling the whole body is like this, or noticing the mood or attitude, whether the mind is aversive or the mind is kind and friendly. Like right now, we can be hearing me, but you could also at the same time recognize what's the mood now, or how's the sitting body doing, what's the flavor, the sort of totality of the body sitting, what's that like? Right? Because it's all happening here and now in the present moment. It's not like there are different compartments. Bodily awareness is over here, hearing awareness is over here, seeing awareness, awareness of thought. No, it's all here and now, isn't it? And here and now, really, by when we say here and now, we're really talking about the space of the mind. Because everything, including our bodily experience, is being known where? Where is the body being known, felt? In the mind. Seeing is being known in the mind. Thoughts are being known in the mind. This is an experience right now. Like in Buddhism, sometimes, even though it sounds a little funny, I don't think I've mentioned this to everyone yet, but sometimes in some schools of Buddhism will say, this is a moment of mind. Because all of it, reality is being known in the mind. That's where it happens. Sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, thoughts, emotions, being known in the mind, being felt in the mind. In that inclusive way. So I don't want to dismiss focus because it's useful, like as a way of breaking the spell of being lost in thought. And we bring the attention to something. What's the feeling here? Feel the body sitting. Feel the next in-breath. And using that focused attention until there's that trust and that confidence in being present. And then we can notice the more inclusive nature of present moment awareness, that everything is here. Like my whole life, it's all here and now, isn't it? There's nowhere else, is there? Our thoughts kind of paint a picture as if there's someplace else than this, doesn't it? It's like, yeah, there's yesterday, or 5 minutes ago, or there's when I get home. But this is all we have, this. And we have thoughts about other places, like my home space, but that's happening here and now in the mind. My thought about, no, my house, it's over there, 7 blocks. And I got a cat, a partner, but all that is happening here in the mind. And we could have a very sophisticated philosophical argument about, is it really my home over there or not? But all of that sophisticated philosophical argument would be happening in our mind, here and now. There's only the mind, and the mind is always changing, because it's always the next mind, and the next mind, and the next mind. And the fact that this seems a little weird, what I'm saying, tells us that we really haven't gotten interested in the mind yet. We're in our thoughts about reality that include like over there and over, and yesterday and tomorrow and all these, but those are just thoughts happening here and now in the mind. And if you're feeling a little like this is weird, that's good. That means the screws are getting a little loose, and you might actually be interested in sustaining your attention in the mind. And the mind's not really different than saying this. And what we're doing with our course is we're learning to be interested in this. Or you could say learning to be interested in the present moment, or learning to be interested in the heart or mind. And that's really, that's really what it's all about, the Buddhist teachings and practice. Learning to not deviate, to not forget. I think I mentioned this, but it's worth repeating before we end tonight. This great quote from some of you maybe, hopefully have heard of Thich Nhat Hanh. He died a year and a half ago. He's quite famous Vietnamese Buddhist monk who got kicked out of Vietnam during the Vietnam War because he was a peace activist in Vietnam as a Buddhist monk. And but fortunate for us in the West, he taught here in the West for all those years before when he got close to dying, they let him back into Vietnam, and he died there 2 years ago in February. But he has this very simple line that our only real enemy is forgetfulness. It's a really powerful little thing to remember. Things scare us. Death scares us. Loss scares us. Success can scare us. Public speaking scares us. Physical pain scares us. And all that stuff we have to deal with and navigate and learn to be skillful with. But the real problem, the real enemy, is being oblivious, not being interested in the present moment. That's really the root of all of our deep suffering, is not being interested in the present moment. Because we can get lost in our mental constructions, like a lot of the hate, like racism, for example, and any kind of, divisiveness within our families, within our culture. It's because we're in our thoughts about things. We're lost in thought about this group and that group, and all that gets clearer when we learn how to be in the present moment with more continuity. It just all starts to get clear. How hate never really makes sense. It never actually makes sense to throw anything or anybody out of our heart. Doesn't mean we're going to hang out with everybody, but we don't have to hate them. We don't have to throw them out of our heart. And Gabe and I will talk more about loving kindness, how that fits into the practice next week, week 6. So come back. Remember, you might love this practice or find it really valuable, but it's very easy to convince yourself, I'm not going to come back. But finish it up. You really stuck it out 5 weeks now. Come back one more time and take a look at the document in the handouts for loving kindness practice. If you haven't looked through it yet, take a look at it, because we'll talk about that practice next week and we'll give you a little introduction. It's just a few pages. So take a look at that. Thanks everyone for coming. Hope to see you next Tuesday night. Have a nice evening. And remember, they're sitting in the other room, people here. So when you walk out in the lobby, save your conversation until you get outside the door. And good night to all.